Hi, and welcome to Journey Forward with Joree Rose, where you will gain insights, tools, and inspiration to get unstuck and live your best life. Joree is a licensed marriage and family therapist with a passion for helping people cultivate awareness and authenticity so they can show up fully in all aspects of their life. And now, here's Joree.
Hey everyone, this is Joree Rose. I am so happy that you're back this week because I am so excited to have relaunched the podcast. There's so much I want to share. And most importantly, I'm grateful to you, the listener who is here, who has chosen to spend part of your day here with me with the intention to learn, to grow, to heal, because here's what I know. It is hard to be living in this world right now. There are so many things that we've got to hold space for. And especially as women, we don't easily have the time to tend to ourselves. And so this is my hope that not just listening to this podcast, but that being a part of the Journey Forward community is a way for you to make moving through the world a little bit easier. Being part of community, setting time that's conscious for you to take care of yourself, to heal what needs to be healed, to learn the tools, the skills, the practices to help you navigate whatever is coming into your life in the moment, whether it's relationship stuff, parenting, managing all the chaos that seems to be going on around us, or even as simple but not easy of looking into our past, looking at those unresolved wounds, because when we don't resolve the wounds of the past, guess what? They tend to show up in the present. So with all that being said, life is hard. Being human isn't easy. And being in community and having conversations that inspire us, that motivate us, that teach, that provide resources and foundations, that is what I'm all about. And if you haven't already listened to last week's episode to hear a little bit about why I took a hiatus from the podcast, and more importantly, why I'm back, I'll give just a short little recap. The past handful of years, I'd say about almost edging on 3 years now, have probably been some of the most difficult of my life. And I thought I had healed a lot of the wounds. I thought I had done a lot of my work, and I did. So give credit where credit's due. I spent years and years in therapy. I went through a huge transformation, divorcing from my high school sweetheart and being a single parent and raising my girls with the majority of the custody. I mean, I definitely have not ignored looking at myself or my role in any of the things that I've got going on in my life. And what I realized was I needed to do more. And how did I know that? Well, because things got hard and I didn't feel that I had done the depth of the work that I needed to do to truly get to where I want to be. And some of the things that had occurred weren't necessarily things that I wanted to have happen. And for instance, I had really struggled with the challenges that I was having in my relationship. And I had thought that we were both in the place of, again, having done our work. And what had reared its ugly head was the unresolved wounds of the past getting in the way of the present. And that led to a short breakup in my relationship, which was a breakup, but more importantly, was an absolute wake up to greater healing, greater self-awareness, greater ability to have humility, to look at the shadow side, to look at the dark spots that are hard to look at within ourselves. And what emerged out of that was not only a more connected, authentic, safe, and vulnerable relationship, but gave me the impetus to start looking at myself in other areas of my life. And going from that breakup into some personal stuff with my family of origin, healing wounds that are transgenerational, the patterns I was determined not to carry on, and boundaries that I never thought possible to be able to set. Well, all of that deep work led to also a deep exhaustion, physical, mental, emotional, spiritual, and I needed to give myself a break. And what that looked like was allowing myself the permission to say, I don't have the energy, and I let that be okay. Well, with enough of that rest, that existential rest, I actually got my creativity, my motivation, my inspiration back. And what has emerged is a vision for this podcast in a way that I've never had before. So think of it as part podcast, part masterclass series, part community building, part sisterhood. It's all the things that really is a culmination, I think, of my entire career in one place. And my vision is for this community to keep growing and for more and more women to join who are ready to not just listen to something inspirational, but to take it the next step and say, I want to make that change. I want to have that courage to draw the boundary, to look at my shadow side, to practice speaking my truth, to look at the areas that I thought were resolved, but keep showing up in ways that are telling me maybe they're not as resolved as I thought. That is the vision of Journey Forward. So with that, I am going to cluster together each month in an overarching theme. And if you're part of the Journey Forward community, which is to have, exclusive access into our Facebook group where I'll be coming in for weekly meditations, giving resources, tools, handouts, practices related to that week's podcast, and even going deeper in doing a monthly training for those who are at that tier of the community membership, because I don't want to just teach it. I want to help you integrate it. So the theme for this month, for April, is you can't change what you're not aware of. And this is one of my Joreeisms that when I'm working with clients is truly the foundation. And it's all about establishing an awareness practice. And I think if we're going to do anything, we've got to start with an awareness of where I'm at, an awareness of where I'd like to be, generally based on knowing where I don't want to be, and an awareness of looking at the barriers or the resistance or the perceived roadblocks getting in the way of allowing you to emerge where you want to show up, allowing you to have that conversation in your relationship where you've got the courage and the tools to speak your truth unapologetically, the ability to draw a boundary, knowing even if it's hard, you are worthy of your boundaries not only being drawn, but having the courage to enact them and enforce them. Little side note on boundaries, the person that you most need to draw the boundary with is likely going to be the one who has the hardest time accepting it. That doesn't mean you're not worthy of setting it. I invite you to have awareness of the emotions that are really hard for you to sit with, because whatever you're experiencing resistance around, that is where your growth edge lies. And we all have that feeling of, I don't want to be dealing with this again. But we don't always say the next part is, what can I do different to support or to have the knowledge that I won't allow it to happen again because I'm going to show up differently? Look, change is really, really hard. And we generally believe I'll be better when someone else does something different. That would be lovely, but that would require the other person to have the awareness that you are wanting them to have. Generally doesn't work that way. So this is an internal job. If you need something different in your life, you are the one who gets to create it. And my hope is that through, again, these episodes, through these tools, through these teachings, and then being in greater community, you will have a better opportunity to create the change that you are seeking. Because I do know it's possible. I do know that you are worth it. And I do know that healing does not happen overnight, but when it does, the burden you can release of carrying what has been heavy for so long will lighten you in ways you don't even yet know. And most importantly, what I'm here for is to help guide you in being better, in better relationship. Most importantly, first and foremost, to yourself, to quiet that inner critic, to have more self-compassion, not only for where you're at, but where you've been, to be kinder in the way that you talk to yourself, the way that you treat your body. I really am working on being in better relationship with my body. I know that I'm someone like many women who has struggled with their weight the majority of my own life. And that is where I'm currently working really, really hard at not just acceptance, but also kindness, because that is where the root of transformation starts, not from judgment, not from blame, not from shame, not from anger, not from frustration, not from comparison mind. So whether we're working on being in better relationship to yourself, to your past, to your body, and how to be in better relationship with those you love, your partner, your kids, your family, your friends. This is truly what Journey Forward is all about. So I've always had a symbol that has been representative of not just my business, but my life. It has been my business logo since I started, and it is called an Unalome. I will be sure to have this week in my social media a picture of an Unalome. So if you're listening right now, hit pause, head over to Instagram at Joree Rose so you can see the picture of what I'm talking about. I can't recall where I first came across it, but I know I was instantly drawn to it because I've always loved spirals. And, you know, spirals are in and of itself a very spiritual symbol. It really represents that journey in our life. It could be journey inward, deep into our soul. It could be journey outward into our growth. So whichever way the spiral goes. But the Unalome in particular is something that represents my biggest intention, which is to have the awareness of where I'm at. And if I'm stuck, the awareness that getting unstuck is a possibility. So if you're not looking at the picture of the Unalome right now, I'll try to paint it for you so you can visualize it in your mind. But there's a big spiral. And at the top of that spiral, coming out of it is a line. And it at first has lots of undulations back and forth, like kind of a twisting, winding road. And as that line coming out of the spiral twists and turns, those twists and turns become a little bit smaller. And towards the top of that line, it's almost straight. So what this symbol represents is a path to greater peace, or quote unquote enlightenment. As John Kabat-Zinn, who's the grandfather of mindfulness, once said, there's no such thing as pure enlightenment, but maybe just perhaps enlightened moments. And I love that because there's a lot less attachment on what it means in that journey, because it's never anywhere we're going to fully stay because we're human. We're going to get triggered again. We're going to get stuck again. We're going to fall down. And there's always the reminder, I can pick myself up and I know how to do that. So this symbol is the reminder that when you're stuck, there is always the path out. So the spiral in the center represents where you get stuck. It's where you get triggered. It's where you're moving on autopilot, unaware of even the fact that you're on autopilot. It's that hamster wheel of life in which you just keep spinning. And many people stay there their whole lives, not even aware that they're spiraling. They think this is just life. It's supposed to be hard and chaotic and unhappy and difficult and challenging. And yeah, that's part of it. But we can get out of there, even if just momentarily. So the spiral represents where we get stuck. Well, that line coming out, as I described, is not a straight line. Those twists and turns are the reminder it takes work. It's not a direct path to say, I want to get unstuck. I want to heal. I want to resolve this argument. I want to heal that wound of the past. So therefore, boom, it's done. If only it were that simple, I might actually be out of a job as a therapist. So that line is the tools and the resources and the practices that we need to enact to get unstuck. And to me, that's mindfulness right there. It's how to be present, how to breathe, how to be noticing where the attention of your mind is resting. Is it in the past where you're ruminating? Is it in the future where it's all full of anxiety of the unknown? Are you able to tune into gratitude, compassion, loving kindness, acceptance, not attachment? These and so many more are the skills and tools to be able to get out of that spiral. But here's the thing. You got to be aware that you're even stuck. You got to be aware that you're in the spiral. So what I want to talk further about today is what I call the ABCs of mindfulness. And this is really going to serve as a foundation of everything I'm going to be talking about further. And my vision for the way that this podcast is going to emerge as different from before is really through a story arc, is, sharing things that I've gone through, experiences, and highlighting the tool, the takeaway, the resource. And that's the thing that I invite you to go deeper with. I really hope that my stories are inspiring, relatable, allow you to see you're not alone in what you're going through. And while the details are different, what we share in common is the human experience of emotion, of relationships, of pain, of joy, of sorrow. And through those human connections, we can bind together and to say, while I feel alone, I'm actually not. And the vulnerability to share that. So at its root, this symbol, the spiral and the line coming out, really are the foundation of my personal and professional life. Like I said, I had it as a symbol for my business as soon as I got one. And only a few months into dating, my partner, John, who we've now been together 9.5 years, engaged for over half of those years, a few months that we were just dating, I had the grand idea for us to travel together. And I wanted to go somewhere exotic. We chose to go to Thailand. And I was really excited because I knew that the Unalome was a Thai symbol. And supposedly it was on the front of many Thai temples. So one of the reasons I wanted to go to Thailand was because this is where my logo for my business originated. And I wanted to go see it. So it was a little bit of a journey for us to be able to get there in terms of, when I brought this up to him, we were only dating a few months, and the thought of going somewhere exotic 4 months away caught him like deer in the headlights. And we took a little mini trip first to see how we traveled together. And that really was the trip that we fell in love. So we ended up, heading off to Thailand after dating for only 7 months. And I can say that that trip was absolutely magical. It was like being on a honeymoon. It was complete, just pure joy on every sense of the word. And we went to Bangkok. We went to Chiang Mai, where we had the most amazing elephant experience. And we ended our trip in Koh Samui, which is an island. And we're sitting at a restaurant on the beach. And the owner of the restaurant was a French guy. And the restaurant was like literally like in the sand. So he was only in a bathing suit. And this guy was covered in tattoos. And I'm not a tattoo person, but he was just this beautiful French man, kind of looked like David Beckham. And I saw on his collarbone, he had these unalomes. There was a set of 3 on either side of his collarbone and a line of Thai writing connecting each unalome to the other side. So what I could see was like 6 different unalomes. And in that moment, I had the awareness, the humble, mindless awareness. Oh my God, we were in all these temples in Bangkok and in Chiang Mai, and I forgot to look for the symbol. And I couldn't believe it because that was one of the reasons I wanted to go there. Well, I asked him, what did the Unalome mean? And his definition confirmed, thankfully, since that was my business logo, his definition confirmed what I believed it to know, which it was that path to peace, to get out of that spiral to greater enlightenment. And he even turned around and showed me on the back of his neck. He had another one of these tattooed on him. And soon after we had this meal, John and I are sitting on the beach on lounge chairs drinking some fruity drink. I think it was a pina colada, if I remember correctly. And I was thinking to myself, I told myself to come to Thailand and look for the Unalome, and how mindless of me that I didn't look for it. And now here I am, almost at the end of the trip. And here I see it, but in tattoo form. And so I was thinking, I think I might want to get a tattoo. So I tell this to John, and I thought he would do the responsible and reasonable thing, which would tell me that was a silly thought. And his response was the complete opposite, and actually said, yeah, I think I want to get that too. And I was like, oh, that was never in my mind that we would get matching tattoos, let alone I would never get a tattoo, let alone do that here in Thailand. So we sat with it for a little bit. And on the lounge chairs we were sitting on, there was a small little table in between us. And there was a little seashell on that table. And at one point I turned it over, and on the back of it was a perfect spiral. And I thought, okay, universe, thank you. This is the sign. This was a sign we were supposed to get these tattoos. And the day before, we had been on this absolutely epic journey that was full of synchronicities. And I'll share that story another day. And just by coincidence, John happened to make note of a tattoo parlor. And when we brought up this idea of tattoos, he's like, oh, I saw one yesterday. He remembered the name. I gave a call and made an appointment for that afternoon. And this was a really, really, really big deal because I'm Jewish, and tattoos have always been greatly discouraged. I've discouraged it from my kids because part of it was I wasn't sure what I would want to have on my body that I would want to have forever. But this symbol seemed to fit that description of something I believed in enough that I would want to have the rest of my life, because I wanted the reminder that I'm on a spiritual journey. I'm on a spiritual path. I wanted the reminder that if I got stuck in that spiral, there's always a way to get out. And that made sense for John and I to both get one because he was also on a spiritual journey in his life. We also learned that there's actually a male and a female version depending on which way the spiral goes. So luckily we knew that. So I got the appropriately female one and he got the male one. But even though we were early in our relationship, I loved this idea that as a couple, we could have the reminder that wherever we got stuck, there was always a path out of that spiral. And believe me, like we've utilized that symbolism a lot in our own relationship. And his is on his shoulder. Mine is kind of on my lower hip. So his is much more easy to access and see by just lifting up his shirt sleeve. But in times when even we as a couple got stuck, I would touch his tattoo and I would look at it. And it was the reminder of we can do this. We can get out of the spiral, which, by the way, that was a really, really hard part for me during our breakup was, oh shit, I never thought getting out of the spiral for us meant going separate ways. And I dreaded anyone asking, if I had to really move on in a future relationship to answer the question of what's the story of this tattoo, because I really felt like it bound us together in this journey. And, happy story to the end of our breakup, we got back together. So it really did. And I'm so grateful that we had the courage to really commit to the meaning of what the Unalome is. So with that, I've always used it as a basis from teaching with my clients. And I actually have this little phrase that I call the ABCs of mindfulness, using the spiral as like a roadmap. Because I know that as we get stuck and we come up with challenge and things are hard, we want that path out, but we don't necessarily have the roadmap. And that's part of what I also envision this Journey Forward community is providing the roadmap of how to get out and stay out of the spiral of whatever that means in your moment, in your relationship, in your life, in your healing journey. I want to be the harbinger of this roadmap. But it starts very simply with this ABCs of mindfulness. So as I started to say at the very beginning, you can't change what you're not aware of. So the A for ABCs means awareness. Awareness of where you are is the only place that you can get unstuck is by even just noticing that's where you are in this moment. So the A is like being in the center of the spiral. And having compassionate awareness is key. If you have judgmental awareness, and that mostly has to do with the way that you're naming it in your own mind, the tone of your voice that you speak to yourself in, the frustration or the acceptance of where you're at. Because oftentimes, if you speak to yourself with any kind of judgment, that is not going to be the way that you get out of that spiral. Judgment is going to be one of the most surefire ways to go right back into the middle of it. So it's got to be awareness with compassion, with kindness, with self-love, with acceptance, with a gentleness, with an honoring that, yeah, you're human. We're stuck right now. And that's okay because I also know I can get out. The B stands for breath. And if you can go back and look at a picture of that Unalome or just imagine it in your mind, the line coming out of the spiral, the point in which it meets the spiral, I call the mindful moment, because that is the moment that once you're aware that you're in it, you got to remember to breathe. When you breathe, it's going to calm your brain, calm your body, allow you to be able to think clearly, quiet the emotional brain, put your resources back online. If you're not able to breathe, all the awareness may not matter, because if your anxiety or your nervous system is activated, it's going to be really hard to access the tools. The C stands for choice. And that represents the whole undulations and twisting, winding road of the line coming out. It is a choice to engage your tools, or it can also be a choice to go back in the spiral. Sometimes that might be the appropriate choice in the moment. I'm not opposed to you being stuck in the spiral, whatever that means for you. Just know that you're there. Do it with awareness. You know, it's often easier to go back in the spiral than it is to stay out of it, because when we're in it, it's familiar. It's habit. We know how to do it. We may not always like it or how it feels, but we do know what to do there. And that's why so many people stay there. It's harder to do the work to get out of it. That's why it is a conscious choice. But let me tell you, when you do the work, even when it's fucking hard to do the work, being out of that spiral is an amazing place to be. And when you have the experience of being out of it and you embody what it feels like to be unstuck, whether it's something big or small, your brain and your body have imprinted to know that it's possible. And that possibility is what we need to hold on to as the reminder for next time. So the ABCs of mindfulness: awareness, breath, choice. And you can see where that maps on to the Unalome as a very visual roadmap of, oh, I'm not happy right now. What do I need to do to get out of it? Or I'm feeling stuck in this relationship, or I'm simply just in traffic right now and I'm just throwing curses all around me. And that's not a great way to start my day. So how can I calm down? Right? So whether it's like big existential spirals you're in, or whether it's just simply, I'm stuck in traffic, or I can't find a pair of jeans that fit comfortably today, it doesn't have to be big and existential to throw you back into the spiral. So I invite you to consider, what are the spirals that you're currently in your life? What are the areas that you find yourself getting stuck in over and over and over again? And this is an exercise, a homework practice, if you will, to name your spirals. And I don't care if you list 100. In fact, the more you can list, I think the more honest you're being with yourself. And if we can bring awareness to your spirals, then we have a greater ability to notice in the moment when they arise, and therefore a greater ability to engage your tools. And part of the podcast community is going to be me supporting you in developing those tools, or simply reminding you that you have them. That is part of the goal, is the remembering. And one of the ways, by the way, that we remember who we are, if you haven't set this as a foundation, is through meditation. And I'll talk a lot more as we go on around, the roots of mindfulness and why meditation matters. But that's partly why in the podcast community, I'm going to be guiding weekly meditations, because I don't care if you've established a practice and you used to do it all the time. It's something that is best served when you do it consistently, because meditation is a remembering. It is coming back into yourself, remembering who you are before any of the shit happened, coming back into the essence of your soul and your spirit before any of the traumas affected you, coming back into the emotions that as a kid you felt unapologetically before you got shamed for feeling or expressing yourself. Meditation is an opportunity to connect with the essence of who you are outside of the conditions that keep you quiet, of not letting that essence speak louder. It is such an important foundation. So outside of that, I can go on for days about the power of meditation, and I'll talk about it here. But for right now, I invite you to consider your spirals. And if you are part of the podcast community, you'll find a handout on this. It'll be emailed to you, and it'll also be in our exclusive Facebook group for you to access. But this is a really, really important place to start. If you're trying to grow or heal or transform any of your relationship to yourself, if you're trying to feel more expansive, tap into your spiritual practice, any journey that you're on is going to require an awareness of your starting point. If you're not aware of your starting point, it's going to be really, really hard to get to where you go. So I can't overemphasize this enough. And then the next piece of this is being really, really mindful of how you talk to yourself in your own mind when you recognize you're in the spiral. I said it a few moments ago, and I'm going to reiterate, be mindful of your inner critic versus your inner self-compassionate voice. Your inner self-compassionate voice is going to be the way you would talk to your very best friend, your sweet, loving child. It is the voice of acceptance. It is the voice of love. It is the voice of care. Our inner critic tries to blame and shame us into change, and that's never going to work. Maybe if it does, it'll be like really quick, momentary change, but we're looking for long-lasting change. We're looking for actual transformation. And that's going to require self-compassion. So be really mindful of the language that you speak to yourself in your own mind. Because, one of my truisms, one of my Joreeisms I always say is, it's not about the thing, it's how you relate to the thing. Because how you relate to what's arising is going to impact your experience of what's arising. So that spiral is simply just a spiral. The way you talk about the spiral is going to impact how you feel about it. So be really mindful of how you relate to it. And we'll talk a lot more about that here as well. And, we're looking for the opportunity to increase awareness of not just where we're at, but the reminder that we can get out of that. And the power of our breath is so, so, so important. And, the last thing I want to say on this is you always, always, always have conscious choice. It may not feel like you do. You might be in relationships where that conscious choice feels conditioned out of you. You might be afraid to enact your agency. You might have never even known that you could enact it because the people around you never supported your voice being heard or respected or honored. So I am here as the voice of the most idealized, loving, comforting, supportive parent that you might not have had, or the friend who didn't really hear you and just told you just to suck it up and deal, or it's not that big of a deal. Or maybe it's the voice of your partner who is dismissing what you're saying is important. I want to be that benevolent voice in your ear at any time to say, You are worthy of being heard. You are worthy of healing your wounds. You are worthy of growing. You are worthy, period. And so if you can hear my voice telling you that, I invite you to adopt a gentler voice of how you speak to yourself in your own mind, because your ability to consciously choose new pathways and new patterns is going to be dependent upon your worthiness of believing you can and it's possible. And if you can't get there yet, that is quite okay. I will be the one holding the space because I've done the impossible. I truly, I'm not saying this from a place of bragging. I'm saying this from a place of the most humility that I possibly could. I have grown in ways I didn't think possible because I made the conscious choice. I could no longer continue to live the way that I was. It was scary as fuck. It was hard as hell. And the possibility of not growing and not changing was no longer available to me. In fact, it makes me think of my favorite quote, my enlightening quote of the day came when the risk to remain tight in a bud was greater than the risk it took to blossom. And that is ultimately the pathway out of the center of the spiral in the Unalome. When we're in the spiral, we are a tight bud afraid to grow. When we enact our conscious agency to access our worth, to get out of being stuck, we grow and we blossom and we bloom. And that is the journey forward I'm here for. So thank you so much for listening today. I hope that you not only learned something, you got the visual of the Unalome. If you want to be part of the Journey Forward community and get access to these additional resources and you're not currently, then go to the link in the show notes, or you can go to my website, joreerose.com. Under podcast, you'll find a page for the membership. It's quite reasonable. $11 a month for the basic tier, $22 for the upgraded. That gives you the free trainings, the access to the live Zoom calls once a month based on the cohesiveness of the theme of the podcasts of those weeks. And also, we're going to do quarterly virtual retreats and a yearly in-person retreat. But most importantly, we're in community growing together. Because what is more beautiful than growing, healing women, empowering themselves, which therefore have a ripple effect of all those around them. It's a beautiful sight to envision. And again, I'm here for it, and I hope you are too. So if this was inspiring to you and you have a friend you'd like to journey forward along with, you also can get a free month of the membership when you refer someone in, or simply just share this podcast. Give a rating, a review, so others can learn more about Journey Forward and begin on their path of getting out of the spiral and towards that greater peace and enlightenment in which you get to be your most aligned, most authentic, and most abundant self. I can't wait to continue to journey forward with you. Thanks so much for listening today.
To continue your journey forward, find Joree Rose on Facebook and Instagram to become part of her growing community. You can also gain access to her meditations, books, online classes, or to sign up for an upcoming retreat. Visit her at joreerose.com. That's JOREEROSE.com.